Hello, welcome to episode 2, Harley-Davidson and other motorcycles in my world. First, in My Bike and Me, we'll look at the trials and tribulations of my Sportster. After that, we'll look at other people and their bikes, and we have some splendid bikes to look at this time, not just Harley-Davidson but some wonderful classic Japanese too. Stay tuned. Morning one and all, and welcome indeed to episode 2 of My Bike and Me. I've been so fortunate this month as UK lockdown has eased and crucially the weather's been dry. Cold but dry, which is good enough. So I've donned my electric gloves and been able to ride over 1,000 miles. Wonderful. If you, dear viewer, watched episode 1 of My Bike and Me last month, you'll remember some of the woes that befell me, especially starting the bike. Took over half an hour, but according to Crew Gadget, part of the problem was caused by me swearing in Anglo-Saxon, not in American four-letter. Well, you live and learn. However, there are some other less significant factors too. For instance, as I mentioned in episode 1, the battery. When the temperature gets below freezing, I'm pretty much stuffed because the motorbike battery just can't hold enough juice after its first winter. The solution turns out to be having your brother give you a solar panel and controller, like this. I've no idea what make they are, but the panel is 25 watt and it pumps out just enough power to keep the battery sufficiently stoked to start the bike. Note how the cables are neatly affixed to the wall and carefully placed in well-organised coils across the floor. From the solar panel controller module, the cable connects directly to the battery fly lead that Harley supply on all their UK bikes. Apparently, the security system and keyless ignition are terrible drainers of battery energy, but since most bikes come with security these days, it's a case of having to live with it. Although the solar panel will only power 3 or 4 winter starts, that's okay because the bike nearly always fires on the first or second hit. Here's me trying to start the bike after connecting the solar charger for the first time. The big question is, will it start? Let's listen in. Fingers crossed. Go on, son. Go on. There we go. See how much it meant to me? Although it was a bit of a struggle, it got there in the end, and a few days later I was able to have a great ride out over Dartmoor, which is in the video log playlist if you want to watch. There are many issues with owning a Harley Sportster, same as with any bike I imagine, but some are really irksome and quite specific to Sportsters. One that any Sportster owner will recognise is totally predictable but nonetheless annoying: exhaust. Actually, this can be a problem on many Harleys because we like to have a V-twin engine with both exhausts exiting on the same side. Obviously the rear pipe's going to be a problem. Here you can see the attractive black splurge that once was the inside of my waterproofs. Note how I carefully used some 6-inch wide exhaust wrap to protect my precious waterproofs, only to discover that I should have used 12-inch instead. I have since replaced this horribly flimsy piece with a strip that covers the heat shield all the way down. Another really annoying issue is the rusting. There are many spots, we'll look at others in another video, but the forks bear special and shameful mention today. The upper fork tubes are appalling now. The rust bubbles up so quickly. It's caused by the screen clamps that fasten onto the tubes themselves. The clamps do have a rubber padding, but it's tiny. One might describe it as wafer thin. That is, it's pathetically inadequate and leaves the forks penetrated with pitting initially, which soon allows rust to spread. I do use tin foil and water to remove it every time, but it always returns, and both the pitting and the rust continue to spread. But the horror show gets worse. Look at the lower fork legs, or sliders in Harley speak apparently. The left side is poor, especially at the bottom, but wait till you see the other side. I call this leprosy. It first showed around Christmas 2019, but before the end of January 2020 it had exploded. The feeble layer of lacquer on the fork legs quickly fails in tiny spots. In Northern Europe, road particles hitting the forks cracks the lacquer, then water and salt finishes the deal. You can't clean it off either because it's corrosion underneath the lacquer. I complained to the dealer. He asked the Harley rep who was present at the time, but the rep literally ran away. Lee, who was in servicing, sympathised but said all you can do is re-lacquer, which seems pointless, or get the forks powder coated. Sigh. The top tubes do clean up all right, but the pitting remains and so the rust will return soon enough. I ride 12 or 15,000 miles a year and I expect my bike to manage that without fuss. If I ever have the money, I'll get all the chrome and lacquer powder coated, or preferably have a dedicated bad weather bike like a Road Glide and another bike for bling like a Sportster XL1200CA fully customised. But until that day, I'll continue with my relatively standard Sportster and enjoy it to the max. I do also enjoy making these videos, which I really need you all to subscribe to. Please! It's Trez hard work putting these together, so if I could eventually earn money for it, well, that would be splendid. Anna and I have also been advised that Instagram is the way to go, but we just cannot manage another social media platform. So if you, as dearest viewers of the highest order, could link our videos there and on WhatsApp, it'd help enormously. Also, please like the videos, as this helps too, though I'm not exactly sure why at this stage. Next month we'll do some more of my bike and me, when even more serious and annoying rust issues will be highlighted. But you know what? Even with all this, and much more, I still love my Sportster. Go figure. At the huge M&P site just outside Swansea in South Wales, I met a lovely gent and his wife. He was riding a Victory, no idea which model, and she was riding a Triumph America. The gentleman invited me to sit on the Victory, which when I first saw it looked huge, it was so long. He said it was because of the fluted end to the rear mudguard, it extended a long way off the rear wheel. Still, it was lovely and it was a comfortable bike to sit on and in fabulous condition. It turns out that the gent was a retired paratrooper, and he and his wife rode out to Arnhem in Holland most years to commemorate the Bridge Too Far warriors. Apparently they meet up with Belgian commandos and Dutch paratroopers for a warm and deeply poignant commemoration. It was a real privilege just to be able to shake him by the hand. His wife used to travel pillion, but now refuses because she's so happy with her own bike. A lovely Triumph America in amazing condition. She said she bought it from her daughter, and that it was only her third bike. She clearly loved it, and with good reason. She was also kind enough to let me sit on it, and I was amazed at how large it felt. For an 865cc bike, it felt every bit as big as my 1200 Sportster, but, she said, it was much lighter. You can't argue with that. Right next to us, a guy on a brand new Royal Enfield Himalayan parked up. I was stunned that it was new, as this was only the second day after the full UK lockdown had ended. He said he just knocked on the door during lockdown and bought it. A most curious episode. I went down the seafront last Sunday too. The first guy I met there was Mike Soundy. Sound with a Y, he said. His bike was a highly customised Softail Custom from 2007.
Original Palco, I got them from the States at very close to £1,000, and the first time they delivered the wrong pipes. They delivered them for an Evo 1340 and they wouldn't fit. So I got the right ones, but they didn't send the heat shields.
They're straight through, I suppose.
Yeah, they are.
I also saw this beautiful, from memory, 1975 Suzuki GT500. The gent said he bought it fully restored last year, and only had to add suspension plus one or two other minor items. Again from memory, he said it was owned by one family from new and had only covered 13,000 miles. It cost him £5,000, and since everything about it was gorgeous, it seemed like good value to me. Unfortunately, I didn't get any real video as the camera failed to record more than 2 seconds twice. A real shame, as this was a peach of a bike. But I include these rather shaky shots of him pulling away just for the wonderfully iconic sound. Just after the GT500 left, I couldn't help but notice this regular Purple Haze of a Road King. It was absolutely pristine. The tall but very nice gent arrived with his lovely wife and told me that the bike was his wife's favourite colour. I'm not sure if that's what swung the deal, but she did confirm that riding pillion was very comfortable. I questioned the lack of screen, but he shrugged it off. He was clearly too much of a big and powerful gentleman to worry about such details. I felt obliged to confirm my own feebleness, because without a screen on my Sportster, I'm crying like a baby after 10 minutes. Although the bike was registered as a 2020 model, it was clearly a twin cam. And it had the Screaming Eagle emblazoned on the airbox, and I thought it was a 110 engine, an 1802cc. But it was a 103, a 1690 high output engine. But 2020 model year? Apparently this precious Road King was imported into the UK and registered in 2020 by Harley-Davidson themselves. Although it's a 2016 twin-cam model, it was a show bike for Harley in America. I pondered that a show bike would be very low mileage, and the gent said it had no miles on it. That, and the fact that it only has 1,300 miles on it now, is the reason it's still in fabulous condition. I asked why he went for the older twin cam rather than a new Milwaukee 8, and he said, price. Well, you can't argue with that either. A real highlight for me was this. It's a genuine California Highway Patrol Kawasaki KZ1000, a pucker chips bike. The guy who owned this one had purchased it off eBay a year or so ago. His friend confessed that he'd wanted to buy it, but his wife wouldn't let him. Apparently, getting the bike registered and insured over here was a real nightmare. But well worth it, I piped up, only to be told no. The owner was quite clear, several times. He said he didn't think it was worth the hassle to register a US bike, and that he'd never do it again. I was surprised, to say the least, given the high desirability of these bikes. It was a lovely bike though, and even with over 70,000 miles on the clock, it was in superb condition. But the two gents had spent a huge amount of time and money getting it up to such a high standard. Looking at the engine in profile, it looks very different from the wonderful old Z1s and Z900s that I remember so fondly. This is a much more modern looking unit, squarer along the cases, and the heads are taller with some added architecture. And after researching these beautiful bikes a little, it's no wonder. In an article, Riding with the California Highway Patrol, published in 2001, Motorcycle News pointed out that these venerable old bikes were still in common use by US police departments at the time. Indeed, Kawasaki didn't end production of the KZ1000P until 2005. I had no idea. The original Z1, which Kawasaki called the Super 4 initially, was a 903cc bike which first emerged in 1972. In 1977, the famously bulletproof engine was bumped to 1016cc and the famous Z1000 was born. By 2001, the California Highway Patrol were phasing out the Z in favour of the generally much preferred BMW R1100. On this bike there are lots of, to me, strange US police additions, like the thick bars on the mudguards, and the ironmongery with the huge footboards. They necessitate even more ironmongery and longer, larger pedals. I was very impressed that the exhaust were also stock, although heavily restored. The lasting image for me was that iconic California Highway Patrol badge emblazoned on the brilliant white tank. I'm sure that Ponch and John from the 70s TV show would have approved. It's all just nostalgia really, And as we all know, nostalgia is heavily rose tinted. But who cares when it looks this good?